Well, look who decided to pop up in your feed. What's up, Lego Builders? Welcome back to Coconuts Kingdom. It's been about 3 months since the last Battle of the Bulge update. I'm not going to apologize for the lapse in uploads because this channel is for passion projects that I work on when I can. So consistency isn't always a possibility, but I need to get this mock done ASAP. So break time's over. With that out of the way, don't forget to open fire on that like button and let's get to work. It's been a little while since the last update, so let's do a quick recap. This is what the mock looked like at the end of the last update. A bridge, some rocks and water, and a house that's not even in the right spot. I'd been waiting to finish this Mimban mock before really getting to work on the Battle of the Bulge, mostly because I needed these side walls that will be holding everything up. As many of you know, I got pretty busy over the summer creating a whole new world, and so I didn't get around to putting those foundation walls in until just a couple days ago, which is part of the reason I haven't uploaded any progress updates. Turns out it's hard to build a mock with no foundation. But even just putting those walls in got me excited about this mock again, and I flew through the plating portion and got almost the entire thing ready for terrain, cruising through work I'd been dreading and putting off for months. It's interesting how we can build things up so much in our head, but then when it actually comes down to doing something, it turns out to be a lot easier. Sometimes it's all about just taking that first step. It feels so good to finally have the foundations of this mock in. It's been sitting over here in the corner laughing at me like the Green Goblin for months now. And I realized the reason it was so overwhelming and I kept putting it off is because I felt like so much had to be done before I could keep working on it. I had to reconfigure the side walls, put them in place. I had to put all the plate down, the filler brick in. It just felt like just this one massive task that was holding me back. But now that it's in, I can really just sit down and work on this in little sections whenever I have time. So that I feel like that's really going to motivate me to work on this in the future, because it's like, oh, I've got 30 minutes. Let me just work on a little chunk of rock over here. Let me build another farmhouse. Let me put some tanks in. But up until now, I felt like I had to get all this foundation in before I could move forward, and that was holding me back. So what I'm going to do next is actually work on the rock walls of the river, because I realized after I was done, I can't run the side walls across the entire length of the mock because I'm supposed to have a river right here, and that's just gonna break the immersion of the scene if it just runs into a rock wall. That's not gonna make sense. So I need to finish these side walls, figure out where they stop over here, and then just take out that chunk of the side wall. And then once that's done, I'll know where the rock wall ends, so I'll know how far to run the plate out over here and finish plating off this area. And if I have time, I want to work on the road right here and place this Panther tank. I have a cool little scene in mind with this one. I want it to look like the Panther kind of drove off the road a little bit to fire into the village, but was hit by an enemy tank right here in the treads, disabling it. Then maybe I'll have the turret have been hit as well. I'm not sure yet. Either way, it'll have been abandoned. So I'll have this little blackened area on the front here with some treads and bits of armor laying around, and then kind of like a little bit of a crater right here, not super deep in the ground, but basically where snow has melted around from the heat of the explosion and the blast. Basically, I want to have a damaged, abandoned Panther kind of sitting off to the side. I'd like to get as much of the riverbanks done as I can, since they're technically the final part of the foundation, and once they're finished, I can start working on the terrain. I was planning on having dark green at the top of the rockwork to represent moss and other greenery growing around the river. But this is Belgium in deep winter, so it's about as green and lush as Charlie Brown's Christmas tree, so I pulled up any green slopes and replaced them with a nice blanket of white. Once all that was finished, I was able to adjust the sidewalls, creating a gap for the river to flow through. I want to do something tank related today as well, so I'm going to take one of my Panzer Bricklabs Panther tanks and give it the old battle damage treatment. These tanks were a nightmare on the battlefield because they employed new sloped armor that increased the chances of rounds just ricocheting off the tank. You can see both the turret and sides are angled, and good luck penetrating the 120mm thick sloped chunk of armor on the front. The Panther had some weak points though. Shooting out the engine in the rear or targeting the treads could knock these cats out of a fight. If a tank can't drive or turn effectively, it quickly becomes target practice. The Americans scored a lucky hit on this Panther, disabling the tracks on one side, forcing the crew to bail out. I used black pieces for a convincing damage effect created by the blast. Man, it feels so good to see this table full of bins and loose parts that are actually relevant and being used for this mock project, because that means it's thriving and growing at last. I made a lot of rockwork progress over here. In fact, I finished this entire side of the river and the rockwork looks pretty good. I switched techniques about halfway through, so from here on out, it's mostly the taller 1x2x5 slopes, whereas this one is a lot more of the rounded slopes, and this side does look a little bit blockier, a little bit flatter, but honestly, it's not that big of a deal. and not that different. So that made me happy because this technique or this style of rockwork is so much faster and a lot sturdier than this half, which is part of the reason I was able to get this entire side of the river done in one session. Unfortunately, I think this side of the river turned out way better than this side. The shaping is much more natural and interesting. The overall aesthetic of the rock walls just looks better. And I say unfortunately because we're pretty much always going to be looking at the mock from this direction. So this side of the riverbank isn't going to get a lot of action, but I'll make sure to include it in a couple of shots just to showcase it a little bit. The snow is pretty easy. That's one of the nice things about snow is you don't really have to worry about detail because it's literally like a blanket, just covers everything. So I'm not really going to have any plants. There will be some trees here and there as well as maybe some boulders, but for the most part, the only detailing will just be wedge plates like this, creating different designs and small shapes in the snow. This bridge ended up getting buried a little deeper than I was originally anticipating. You can see the terrain goes all the way up to these retaining walls, but I actually like this look because once all of the snow's in and the road's in, I feel like it's just gonna make everything feel even more buried, which I think is realistic because when you look at a snowy hillside or just a snowy area, everything feels shorter, everything feels buried. So I think that'll just help sell the vibe of this being a winter mock. Really happy with how this Panther tank is looking so far. That battle damage on the front looks really good. There are a few areas where some of the internal filler tan pieces are exposed, so I'm gonna either have to replace those or cover them up. So this whole section can look properly blackened and damaged. It's just crazy comparing this to what the mock looked like at the beginning of the update. Just so much happened in such a short amount of time, which really gives me hope that this mock is actually going to get finished. I'm sure you've all noticed, but the mock has shrunk. I made a calculated decision when returning to this series because I needed to get the mock done as soon as possible because it's using pieces and space that I need for an upcoming project. I've also made a big realization during this series. When it comes to World War II builds, I prefer smaller, precise scenes packed with detail and story as opposed to just filling up a lot of space. I want to spend my time working on interesting builds like battle damaged tanks and houses instead of giant fields or large layouts. So I adjusted this one to a more compelling and sustainable size. But I'm still excited about this series, and in the next episode, we're going to be taking a look at one of the Americans' best weapons against German tanks during this battle. But that's a wrap for this video. Don't forget to let me know what you think of the Battle of the Bulge down below in the comments, and until next time, happy building.